So we continue with our series in the book of Proverbs called Wisdom for Life, and Proverbs has a lot, the book of Proverbs has a lot to say about different kinds of relationships. And I think we'd all agree that relationships are an important part of life. There's a relational fabric that's woven into all of us. We are conceived through relationship, and we are connected to our mothers. That's how we're brought into the world. And we are brought in the world through a bond. Before you can even speak a single word or, have your first sight of the world, you already are brought into the world through a special connection, a bond, a relationship. And from then on, you navigate the world through the safety of relationships. And so God created all of us to be social. Even the introverts among us who would prefer nothing more than to binge their favorite Netflix series or catch a sports game on a weekend alone. God has created all of us to be intimately connected to one another, and He's made us to be social. And that just means that God has given you the capacity to interact with the intention of creating meaningful relationships. Regardless of your personality type, God has given you the capacity to interact with the intention of creating meaningful relationships with others. And friendships are one of those relationships that I'm going to talk about. And we don't, talk about friendship that often, so I'm glad that we're going through this book of Proverbs to navigate this subject. So I'd go as far as saying, apart from the relationship that you have, the nurturing that you receive from your parents, actually, friendships are the second most important human relationship for our development. From as early as you start walking and maybe you go to creche or preschool or you start playing around with your cousins, you might have that one cousin that you're particularly close with, or that one friend that you're drawn to. And we grow close to people, and outside of our family ties, we learn to care for people, to share our gifts and our interests with them, to be mindful of them, to care for them, etc. And so it's really important for us to create these relationships for our own development. And it is through these relationships that we really learn to love for others. So even in a city like Joburg, God, where we tend to be very touch and go with our relationships because we're all so busy. But it's important to remember that God did not bring you here just for career success, just to excel and make as much money as you can. But actually, God's story for each and every one of us is that we would create meaningful friendships. That is part of your story, of God's story for you, that you would be blessed by having friends and you would be a blessing to others by being a good friend. And so these proverbs that we're going to go through on this subject are ancient old observations and advice to us. So how do they work? How do friendships work? How do we make friends? How do we keep friends? What's a good friend? What's a bad friend? These are questions that I'm hoping to answer today. So firstly, let's start with, what do friendships look like? Right, and I've got this this illustration of a pyramid. It's upside down. Just you will see the whole pyramid in a second, right? But at the very top, this is as wide as it gets. And so the dots represent the people in our lives. And so we all have the capacity to relate widely and relate deeply. This is important to stress because when I'm speaking about friendship, it's not merely just the one friend that you can think about, but we all have different kinds of friends, and we would sort of put them into different categories in our lives. And so at the very top, you might have someone perhaps who's a childhood friend, or someone who used to be very close, but because they're not around the same city, you kind of connect with them, via social media, but you don't speak to them regularly. You don't have them pour into your life as regularly as you would like, or maybe it might even be a newish friend that you're beginning to know and share some interests with. Those are wide relationships. And then as we get to know more people, we actually go a bit deeper, right? These are sort of people that we start confiding in. We intentionally go out of our way to create bonds, to make time for them, right? And then we go even deeper. These are people who, when life really gets tough, we can depend on them to be there for us. People who we would cross oceans to be there for. These are people who we've, covered many miles with, and we confide with them regularly, and we make time to sow into their lives and vice versa. And so this whole pyramid sort of represents the people in our lives and the different kinds of friends that we have, right? And so when Proverbs speaks about friends, I think it has in mind this whole pyramid of the different kinds of friends that you may have in your life. But having said that, it also recognizes a special kind of friend that we read about in Proverbs 18:24, and this is what it says: "One who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother." So the first thing here is that if your whole pyramid, which is your circle of influence, if it is filled with unreliable friends, that influence will not be good for you. In fact, it says that influence will lead you to ruin. And so if you move people down that pyramid and you associate with them very closely and they're actually unreliable, well, they will influence you. And that is going to cause your life to go a certain direction. I'm reminded actually of a J. Cole song in which he says the following line. He says, "The good news is you came a long way. The bad news is you went the wrong way." If you journey many miles with the wrong people, you will take the wrong way. And just because you love Jesus, it doesn't mean that you're immune from the influence of bad friends. And so this is, an observation and advice to us. But the proverb also acknowledges in this pyramid that there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother, closer than a sibling, closer than your own blood sister. And this goes against conventional wisdom, where we tend to believe that blood is thicker than water. And I think most of us have lived long enough to maybe experience the reality of this proverb, that actually there is a friend who does stick closer than a brother. Or maybe it might be multiple friends who are actually much closer to you than your own siblings. And we all need this. We all need one of these friends or multiple of these friends that the Bible, this proverb speaks about. And so I also want to remind you that this pyramid is quite flexible. So people will shift in this pyramid based on your needs, based on the seasons of life, and all these things. So it doesn't mean if someone is at the bottom of the pyramid, they will be there forever. They might shift around depending on your life circumstances. But the proverb in part shows us that if you value family, you should value friendship, because there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. So the wisdom on friendship has two pillars. The first one is pursuing healthy friendships and healthy relationships. And the second one is avoiding pitfalls that destroy good friendships. So you must pursue good and healthy friendships and relationships. And secondly, avoid pitfalls that destroy good friendships. But in order to pursue good relationships and friendships, we must understand the value of friends. And the Proverbs help us. So what's the value of a friend? Firstly, friends cheer you on. Friends cheer you on. Proverbs 17:17 says, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity." A good friend is actually a source of unconditional love and support, especially in times of need. And you and I live long enough to face many, many difficult times, right? And a good friend will cheer you on, whether you are sick, whether you're going through a tough time with your family, whether you're feeling stuck in your career, whether you are unemployed for a season, whatever the issue is, we all need friends who will stick around us unless we lose our minds. So a good friend is there at all times. And so there's a connection between going through difficult times and pulling through and the quality and depth of friendships that you have in your life. Good friends will keep you going. And all of us go through a lot in life to realize that we actually need good friends. Regardless of the mess that is happening in our lives, regardless of the challenges that we're facing, you need good friends. None of us can withstand the pressures of life on our own without anyone close to confide in. This is why we need friends. And the proverb actually goes as far as saying, actually, a good friend is born for a time of adversity. So for times of war, you need a friend for times of war, because life does get messy. Good friends cheer you on. Secondly, friends offer trustworthy advice. And so love does not mean that that a friend cannot give you a sharp word when it is required because they love you and they have concern for you. That's not what love means, right? So into Proverbs 27 verse 9, it says, perfume and incense bring joy to the heart, and the pleasantness of a friend springs from their heartfelt advice. And so a good friend will speak sense into your life. They will protect you and be a second pair of eyes to you. However, you need to be open to inviting this advice and receiving it even when it makes you uncomfortable. And so there's a cost to this. The cost is that you might become uncomfortable, but the benefit is much greater because you will receive wisdom that you would otherwise not have received. And so the cost of occasionally being offended versus the benefit of receiving wisdom and making the right decisions. So the benefit outweighs the cost of perhaps being offended when a friend lovingly tells you the truth. And so you and I have a responsibility to invite this kind of friend into our lives and to listen and to take a friend's advice and heed their warnings and take them to heart. There's a colloquial saying in Vernac that says, "Neti ya baba." Neti ya baba, which means that the truth is bitter. You know, it's a bit like medicine. Think about medicine. We don't take medication because it tastes great. We take it because we need it. Now, and the more that we take it, we just get to a point where we accept that this is what it tastes like, and we keep taking it. And you know, our change in attitude is what keeps us taking that medication. The change of medication does not change. It's bitter. All right? You don't take Grandpa and hoping it tastes better the next time you take it. It is what you take it because you need it, and you know what it's going to do for you. So it's a lot with taking advice from a friend. It might be bitter in the moment, but in the long run, you know, man, this is good for me. Why? Because this comes from a trustworthy friend. And a friend will bring trustworthy advice to you, which is like medication to us. So confide in your friends. Confide in these kinds of friends. This is what the proverb calls us to. And so before you cancel a friend because they said something that offends you, since we live in this cancel culture, just double check that your pride is not the issue. Just check that you do not have a problem with humility because you think you've got it all sorted out. But a good friend will be honest with you even if it makes you uncomfortable. Actually, our relationship with God is a lot similar. And so God, because he's loving and gracious and merciful, does not shy away from confronting us. And when we have that relationship with God or that idea of God, we think that God is just okay with everything in our lives. But he's not. But that doesn't make him less loving. You know, God disciplines us. He speaks words of wisdom to us, even at the cost of making us uncomfortable. But he is building us up. So it is with a good friend who pierces our heart for the moment to see us do well and to see us restored. Proverbs says a lot as well, not only about pursuing friendships and about seeing the value of friends, but also protecting friendships if we value them. So if you value something, you go out of your way to protect it. And so there are friendship enders that we need to avoid, that the Proverbs speak about. I'm going to go through them in no particular order. The first one is gossip. The final nail in the coffin of many friendships has been, he said, she said, so I heard. You never got back to what the truth actually was. You know, and while gossip has a sinister intent of painting people in a bad light, it is a particular struggle to people who talk too much. And that's actually not me speaking. That's the proverb. I'm just going to get to it. Just wait for me to get to it. So I just want to say before the proverb comes, it's not saying don't be talkative, but it is saying if you talk too much, you will have this pitfall of saying things you should not be saying in the first place and causing trouble, not only for your friends and other people, right? And the issue here is that gossip betrays trust. Gossip betrays confidentiality. Gossip is a habit. You know, and James in the New Testament actually speaks about the power of the tongue and the need, especially for the believer, to tame the tongue. You know, he speaks of it as a force that is powerful. And all of us have got to tame the tongue. I mean, gossip is really lethal. And I'd go as far as saying it actually destroys relationships before they start. If you haven't met Reggie before, and you're my friend, and I tell you something about Reggie, you might take it as face value and think, oh, that's who Reggie is, based on my experience. You haven't even given him a chance. You haven't built any relationship with him. But based on what Wilson said, and on my friendship with Wilson, surely he's right about Reggie. But that's how we relate. But you see, that's the danger of gossip. It's a friendship ender. This says here, and I want to say before I read the proverb, this is not a female issue, guys. You see, I'm not talking about, it's not a female issue. Guys at a braai watching a game fall to the same temptations of saying things you should not be saying, right? So it's not a woman issue here. Proverbs 20:19 says, a gossip betrays a confidence, so avoid anyone who talks too much. It's quite, it's got a sting to it, because it's not, the prescription here, it's just stay away from anyone who talks too much. You know, because the observation, ancient old wisdom, has seen that gossip has ended many friendships and relationships. There are people who were neighbors who were talking and getting along with each other. I think we've all seen this before. But now, dead silence, no relationship at all. And we've actually seen it in our families as well. Because this aunt said this about that aunt, now there's just no relationship at all. Gossip ends relationships and friendships. So we need to be aware of the power of the tongue and gossip. Secondly, anger. Proverbs 22:24-25 says, do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and easily get ensnared. You will realize that the connection between these two proverbs is, in both of them, the writers are saying, do not associate, stay away, right? And so a hot-tempered person just snaps. They are just very impatient, especially with other people's faults. And they are less forgiving of other people's mistakes. And they feel justified in their anger. In their eyes, they are always right. The offense is always greater than what it actually is, based on how they internalize what has happened. And someone who's like this, someone who's easily irate, will have a struggle keeping friends. Because friendships require a high capacity to forgive the faults of others. And if you don't have this capacity to forgive the faults of others, you will not have friends. Proverbs 15 actually speaks about, the gentleness, of our words, but it also suggests that anger is something that can be learned. And so when you are in a relationship and you are receiving anger, you can almost anticipate it, right, and respond in anger as a result. Proverbs 15:1 actually puts it well. It says, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. And so we've seen this too well. Being on the receiving end of anger only causes you to respond in anger. And when two people are angry, we know you say things you should not have said. You cross the line not only with your words and your actions, and you say things that you will regret later. And we do things that will offend people because of anger. And so anger will turn people away from you. But anger also makes people, it makes it difficult for people to approach you, right? Anger just makes people anxious around you. Like no one's free to be themselves. They're scared of what they're saying, what they might not have been saying that's correct. It just makes people uncomfortably nervous around you. And so anger is a big problem. Therefore, the proverb says, avoid people who are angry, because I've observed that the one who is angry is not able to keep friends. He will end all his relationships. So anger is a toxic trait, and some of us are more anger prone than others. We are just more prone to losing it, not just in traffic, but with people we relate to. And the proverb is saying, hey, avoid people with anger. Now you will notice that these proverbs do not offer any kind of prescription to these issues. The proverb just says, this is the kind of person who is toxic, avoid that person who is toxic. But thankfully, Jesus came into the world, so we will get to the prescription later. And thirdly, another friendship ender is jealousy. Jealousy stops you from genuinely celebrating the wins of others. Jealousy is the lie that we believe that when others are winning, somehow I'm losing. And that for some reason, I deserve what they have, if not more. And it steals the joy of friendship by comparison. And because you're better or seemingly better in one or two areas, jealousy hinders relationship. Proverbs 27:4 says, anger is cruel and fury is overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy? You know, jealousy, unlike anger, is a silent killer. Because when you're angry, you snap. You say things you should not have said. But when you're jealous, jealousy just kind of whispers in your ear that, you know what, I actually think that should be mine. I actually think it should be me in that position. It's not obvious, it's not loud, but it kind of eats away in your heart, and it actually causes a bitterness inside of your heart. But it's also caused by discontent. You know, jealousy says, I don't have enough. You seemingly have more than I do, more than I have, but you also have what I deserve. And so it creates this wedge between us and others through comparison. And so the proverb says, anger is cruel and fury is overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy? You know, like jealousy just actually beats these two. And we've seen it even in our families, that jealousy in different areas of life, jealousy through kids, through where someone stays, what career they have. There's so many areas of a person's life where you can be jealous. And it also just ends relationships, family ties as well. And so these proverbs show us things that end relationships that we need to be mindful of. And because of the reality of our fallenness and our sinfulness, none of us are immune to all these things. So in a sense, these proverbs speak to the human condition, a condition we all have. We all have anger in our hearts, we all have jealousy in our hearts, and we all betray trust as a result of sin having worked in our lives. So in a way, this proverb kind of just speaks to the human condition. All of us in different ways, as we're reading these proverbs, will realize, hey, that's not just about what people have done to me, that's me. It's not just about other people, it's also about us. But how does the gospel engage us on this subject of friendship? The good news is Jesus came into the world, and the gospel engages us in every area of life, even on the area of friendships. So firstly, the gospel helps us maintain friendships by reminding us that Jesus is the ultimate friend to us. Jesus is the ultimate friend to all of us. John 15:15 says, I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything I have learned from my Father, I have made known to you. Jesus said this to his disciples when he'd made known to them all the secrets of the kingdom. And he said to them, listen, I've actually really confided in you guys. I've brought you in. Everything that I know about my Father, I've made available to you. So therefore, I do not consider you as servants. Do not merely consider you as your master. You guys are my friends. You know the riches of the kingdom. I've shared it all with you. I've brought you into loving relationship with me. There's nothing that I've hidden from you. Therefore, you are no longer just a servant. I'm no longer just your master, but I consider you my friends. And Jesus is our friend, and we're singing about it this morning, that regardless of our brokenness, he calls us friends. It's amazing that Jesus can consider us in our fallenness, can consider you a friend, not just a subject, not Lord and Master, but a friend. We are his brothers. But how do we see him exemplify friendship? First thing is that Jesus exemplifies forgiveness. Jesus forgives you over and over and over again. He does not tolerate you. He loves you as a friend. And so Jesus does not only show us what it means to receive forgiveness. As a result of having received that forgiveness, he empowers you to forgive. And so there's a connection between receiving forgiveness from him who calls you friend, who also happens to be your God and Lord, and your ability and your empowerment to forgive those who need that forgiveness. And so this is regardless of your personality type. Those who snap easily might say, this is just who I am. I'm like this. No, you're not. It's not who you are. Jesus exemplifies forgiveness. And because he's forgiven you, your tolerance of the sin and mistakes of others should be higher than it is. This is a challenge to all of us, particularly to those of us who are easily angered. Like, people just get to you so quickly. But you don't remember just how much Jesus has forgiven you and how willingly he continues to forgive you. So be quick to forgive, because Jesus is quick to forgive you as well. When we repent, we don't have to convince Jesus to forgive us. He willingly forgives. We just turn around and repent of our sin, and we find him there willing to embrace us. We don't submit an essay for Jesus' forgiveness. Secondly, Jesus invites you to confide in him. Jesus was a place of refuge for outcasts, for people who felt misunderstood. He spoke gently to people who were vulnerable in society, and his words brought healing and life to those around him. And so his words empowered. He did not tear down, but he built up. And so he frees us from being people who are like the gossiper, who are careless with our words. We use our words to tear down others, to tear down people's reputations, to spread sinister rumors about other people. This is not like Jesus, who was a safe space for people who were vulnerable. The Psalms speak a lot about God as a refuge, God as a fortress. When you're under attack and you had a fortress, this was a space of safety. And when life is hard, most of us would agree that we run to Jesus. We can go to him as a person we can confide in. This is the kind of friend we have. And so he exemplifies being this kind of friend we can confide in. Therefore, we are empowered, like Jesus, to be this kind of friend to the people around us. Thirdly, Jesus assures us that he is mindful of us. Jesus ministered words of security to his friends. He knew exactly what they needed, and he made them aware that he is aware of their needs. And so Jesus talked about God's provision to the disciples, that do not worry about your life. Do not be anxious about these things. I know that you need them. So does my Father, and he will provide for all your needs. And having said that, this assurance is liberating, because it means that you are free from the thief and the lie of comparison. Now, comparison says, because someone has a little bit more, then I don't have enough. But Jesus says, no, actually, God knows exactly what you need, and God is faithful to provide. Therefore, because of God's faithfulness towards you in all seasons of life, there's an assurance and a security that you have in your relationship with other people. And so you can be a friend who is secure in Jesus. And because you are secure in him, the bitterness of jealousy that takes root in our hearts, the bitterness of comparison, of saying I don't have enough, of saying this friend has more than me, or Jesus deals with that. He says, guys, no, I'm mindful of you. I know exactly what you need. I have not forgotten you. So we are free to celebrate other people. We're free to celebrate our friends when they are winning without feeling that we are losing, because God is faithful. And because he's faithful, we can be secure. And we can give love freely, and we can care for others without feeling like something is being stolen or taken away from us. So Jesus comes into our worlds, and he empowers us to be faithful friends, but we see him as a faithful friend to us in times of need. And so as we move towards a time of communion, the band can come up. I want to focus on this forgiveness. And as we were praying this morning, just before the service, I really felt the Lord press on me this forgiveness, that some of us here are bitter. We are holding on to anger, maybe hurt, that we just have not let go. We just have not forgiven. And God wants to remind us that the essence of the cross is that our sin is forgiven. Your sin is forgiven through what Jesus has done. And that forgiveness is not something you just receive, but it empowers you to forgive others. And so when we take joyful communion, we're reminded, man, I have been forgiven much. I have been forgiven much. And we have an opportunity when we take communion to embrace that forgiveness. And we do it Sunday in and Sunday out, to embrace the forgiveness that Christ offers to us. But as we do that, we also have an opportunity to actually forgive others. Forgive the hurt that we may have received, the pain that others may have caused us. Maybe this morning, maybe there's a relationship with a friend that has come to mind where, for one or other reasons, you maybe have not spoken, but it is because you have not forgiven. And I'm not saying go back and be best friends, but I'm saying that forgiveness should not take root in your life. There's an expectation that we forgive because we are forgiven. So as we take communion this morning, I want you to embrace wholeheartedly Christ's forgiveness, but also to pray that he helps you give forgiveness to those in your life to whom you need to give it. Might be a friend, might be someone in your family. I don't know, but as the Holy Spirit leads you, let's embrace this forgiveness.